Good day everyone, my name is Bianca Pusi and I'm with Rawakandela, Upilo Baleseng, Puloko Monare, Sana Amanzi and Lifika Maposa. We will be presenting about the various stages of research writing. These include the topic, the introduction, the research problem, the objectives, the hypothesis, the literature review, the research design, the discussion, the conclusion, and the recommendations. Now to introduce my mate, Rawakandela, to take you through the introduction and the topic.
Good day everyone, I'll be taking you through the topic and the introduction. A topic. This is a specific subject that a researcher plans to investigate on. The importance of a research topic. It helps to guide the literature review and the data collection of the research. Next, we will be moving on to the introduction. This is a brief explanation of keywords from the research topic. Be the importance of the introduction. It explains what you are researching about, why it matters, and gives the readers a clear understanding of the context. Now, I'll be handing over to my fellow group mate, Poloko, who will be discussing about the research problem.
A research problem. A research problem is an issue that the researcher wants to solve and understand. The importance of a research problem is to give the study direction and purpose, and it also allows the researcher to focus on a specific topic. Moving on to how to identify a research problem. We identify a research problem through reviewing existing literature to fill the gaps that were not covered in previous researches. The second one is observing real-world challenges and discussing them with peers. What will be the potential problem? Next, we have the questions to ask about your research problem. The first question is, why is it important? The second one is it researchable? Is there available data to source from? The third question is, who or what does it affect? And lastly, where and when is it happening? Now I'll be handing over to Opil, who will take us through the research objectives and hypotheses.
Good day everyone. Today I'll be talking about two important elements in research writing, which is research objectives and hypotheses. I'm going to start with research objectives. Research objectives are aims and goals that the researcher is willing to achieve at the end of the study. These give the direction and the scope of the study. Now, how do we come up with research objectives? First, you write down the key questions you want answered at the end of the research study. Secondly, you evaluate your questions using the SMART framework. This means that should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. The importance of the research objectives cannot be understated. It helps narrow the scope of the research so that the researcher stays efficient and focused. They also help to determine whether the goals of the research study has been achieved. And lastly, they allow the researcher to clearly communicate the scope of the study. Now we're going to be moving on to hypothesis. A research hypothesis is a predicted or an intelligent guess to the research question. Moving on to how do we come up with research hypothesis. Start by identifying your research question and then gather the information about the research question and then identify your variables, independent or dependent. Finally, make an educated guess as your hypothesis. The research hypothesis plays a key role in research writing because it structures the research design in terms of methodology, data collection, and analysis. It also helps you understand the topic better before carrying out your own research. In summary, research objectives give the goals and the aims of the study, while hypotheses are the possible outcomes of the research questions. With that being said, I'll be heading over to Zaone to talk about literature review and research design.
Good day everyone. I will be taking you through the literature review. A literature review is a summary of what other researchers have already written and discovered about the research topic. Now, we move on to the importance of a literature review. A literature review is important because it helps the researcher to understand their research topic better before conducting their own research. Number two, it helps the study to be stronger
as it is built on existing information. And lastly, it helps to avoid repetition of information because the researcher already knows the existing information about the topic. Now we move on to steps to write a literature review. The first step is to choose your research topic. After that, you then search for sources that you can use, e.g. journals and books. After that, you then thoroughly go through your sources, taking down notes of your comparisons and differences from the different authors. Then you write a literature review using the information you had taken down. And lastly, you conclude with a summary of all the information that you have gotten from your research. Now, how to find credible sources? Firstly, you can search on your database academics such as Google Scholar, and also you can check your libraries for books and journals. Research design. This is the overall plan of how a research is to be conducted. It tells the researcher what to do, how to do it, and in what order for the research to be completed. Now we move on to the components of a research design. This includes the research objectives, the hypothesis, the data collection methods, data analysis, discussion, conclusion, and your recommendations. Now we move on to the types of research design. One can ask, what are the types of a research design? These are the tools and techniques that a researcher uses to collect and interpret data. Now, the three types of the research design. Firstly, we have the quantitative or descriptive design. In this one, the researcher uses numerical data and statistical analysis to find patterns. For example, we have experiments and surveys. Then we move on to the qualitative or the explanatory design. In this one, the researcher uses words and descriptions to find meanings of research topics. Then lastly, we have the mixed design. In this mixed design, the researcher uses both numbers and words to collect and interpret data and get a better understanding. How to choose the correct method for collecting and interpreting your data. Firstly, you identify the type of information that is needed. Secondly, you can pre-test the methods that are existing to find the one that works best for you. Lastly, you can check for the available resources, example, time and money. Now we move on to the importance of a research design. First importance of a research design is that it creates a quick and clear approach to the research topic. And the second one is that it guides the researcher to align their objectives to their research and to prevent the wastage of resources and efforts. Now I will hand over to Bianca, who will take us through the conclusion and discussion.
Discussion. This is whereby you interpret your findings, explain their meaning in more depth, and relate them to the research objectives. The importance of the discussion. It helps interpret your findings. The second importance is that it establishes the significance of the research topic to the society. The last importance is that it helps support in future researches as it identifies areas that need further exploration. Moving on to the key components of a discussion. These include the summary of key findings, the interpretation of results, comparison with literature or previous studies, implications, limitations, which are the weaknesses of the study, and lastly, the recommendations. Next, we have the conclusion. This is the final part of the report or presentation. This is where the researcher summarizes the study and emphasizes the main findings and implications of the research. Components of the conclusion. Firstly, you restate the research problem. Then you summarize the findings. You also discuss the implication, state the limitation, and lastly, state the recommendations. We have the importance of the conclusion. The conclusion helps answer the research objectives that you had set at the beginning of the research. The conclusion also helps offer recommendations for future studies. Lastly, it helps bring together main arguments, findings, and insights to show how they fit together. Now I'll be handing over to my mate Ifika, who will be talking about the last stage in the research writing, which is the recommendation.
Recommendations. These are suggestions based on your research findings aimed at addressing problems. Purpose of research recommendation: enhance the relevance to the research as it offers practical solutions to help solve identified problems, and supports implementations of findings that have been gathered from research. Helps decision making as it identifies gaps, limitations, and new directions to the study. Key features of a good research: they should be based on findings of research. They should be specific and key. They should be realistic, achievable suggestions using available resources. This will be the end of our presentation. Thank you.